Hello, I am Tae-Yoon Kim from the International Energy Agency. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about the key findings of the report we released earlier this year about the role of critical minerals in clean energy transitions. Starting with some context. So in 2020, despite of the pandemic, we have seen some growing momentum for clean energy transitions. Many countries and companies announced the pledges to reduce their emissions to net zero by mid-centuries. And in our estimation, those countries account for some 70% of global GDP and emissions, and this share will only rise over time. And of course, these are yet pledges, but as they turn into actions, it means a massive acceleration in clean energy deployment. But a clean energy system is quite different from the one fueled by hydrocarbons, in a way that they need a lot of minerals and metals to build. You know, lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, graphite are all vital for batteries performance, and rare earth elements are critical for wind turbines and electric vehicle motors. And solar panels are not very mineral intensive, but the sheer scale of their future capacity addition means plenty of additional demand for copper, silicon, and silver. And likewise, the grid networks requires a lot of copper and aluminum to build. That means as we advance energy transitions, we are shifting from a fuel-centric energy system to a more mineral-intensive energy system. For example, a typical electric car requires 6 times more mineral resources than a conventional car. Likewise, offshore wind requires 13 times more mineral resources than a similar-sized gas-fired plant. In general, there's no shortage of mineral resources, but at the same time, there's no guarantee that supplies will be available at the right time and at affordable prices when you need them. So there's some need for policymakers to pay early attention on these issues to reduce the risks of price volatility and supply disruptions. And the first question to address this issue is about how much do we need? How much could demand rise? A short answer is achieving global climate goals means a quadrupling of overall mineral requirement over the next 2 decades by 2040. And an even faster energy transition to hit net zero emissions globally by 2050 means 6 times more mineral resources requirement than today. But I'm showing this 4 to 6 times demand growth here, but some minerals, especially battery metals, sees much faster, the much largest demand growth. For example, lithium for clean energy technologies, demand expected to grow by 40 times over the next 2 decades, with also the graphite, cobalt, nickel also sees some 20 to 20 times demand growth from between today and 2040. And this huge expected demand growth has 2 major implications. One is about the growing role of clean energy sector in driving demand growth for most of the many of the minerals. Some 10 years ago, the energy sector represented a small share of total mineral demand, but already the clean energy transition is emerging as a major force in driving the demand growth for many of the minerals. And so we are seeing some strong linkages between the mineral market, metal market, and the energy market. And the second implication is about the cost of clean energy technologies. Over the past decade, we have seen some rapid reduction in the cost of clean energy technologies due to technology learnings and economies of scale. But a flip side of that is that now the raw materials, including minerals and metals, account for a large portion of total cost of clean energy technologies. That means any price volatility or fluctuation can have a major impact on the cost of clean energy technologies and in turn the investment requirement for energy transition, which is why the policymakers need to pay attention to this topic to ensure the orderly energy transitions. And there are also implications for companies working on this field. Today, the revenue from coal production is around 10 times larger than the revenue from energy transition minerals. But we think this picture is set to change quite rapidly in the energy transition scenario as coal use goes into structural declines, and energy transition minerals gain a tailwind from the rising demand and also the rising prices. In our projections, the combined revenue from energy transition minerals overtake that of coal production well before 2040. And this has a major implication for companies' business strategies and business portfolio. Moving on to the supply side, the key issue on the supply side is about the higher the level of geographical concentration of productions. From copper to cobalt to lithium, in many cases, the level of concentration of production is much higher than that of oil or natural gas. In many cases, top 3 producing nations control well over 3/4 of global production, and in some cases, a single country control well over half of global output. But the issues about concentration is not just about the mining side. When it comes to processing and refining, the level of concentration is even more visible with China's strong presence across the board. The issue about this higher geographical concentration is when there are some physical disruptions or trade restrictions or other event happens in a major producing country, and it can have a major impact on global supply and prices, and in turn with the ripple effect on consumers, which is why the level of concentration of production matters also for consumers. Another issue on the supply side is about the question whether the supplies will be available to support the rapid growth of demand in a climate-driven scenario. And today's investment and supply plans are more like geared toward the world with some gradual and insufficient action on climate change. So we are seeing some looming mismatch between the strengthened climate ambitions and the supply of minerals. And this challenge is compounded by the declining resource quality and also the long lead times to develop new projects. Another question that we had to answer when we are undertaking these studies, because many of the energy transition minerals have a higher emission intensity than the bulk materials. So when you take into account the emissions from mineral development and how clean are the clean energy technologies. So we compare the choice today between buying an electric car and buying a gasoline car, looking at the life cycle emissions. So for gasoline car, there are some emissions from the vehicle manufacturing phase, but the majority comes from the fuel that is combusted. For an electric vehicles, there are emissions from vehicle manufacturing phase, which is actually higher than that of a gasoline car. But even though when we consider some higher emissions from the mineral development, the gap is not that large, so not that huge. So the questions about life cycle emission effectively boils down to the question about electricity, the carbon intensity of the grid to charge the electric vehicles. So using the average electricity mix in our climate-driven scenario, the life cycle emissions of an electric car is around half of that of a gasoline car, with additional potential for further reduction when using the cleaner electricity. So tackling these emissions from mineral development is very much critical and very important, but at the same time, we think they don't undermine the environmental advantage of clean energy technologies. So in our report, we presented some 6 key areas of actions to ensure the sustainable and reliable supply of minerals. The first item is about ensuring the adequate investment in diversified sources of supply. For this, the most important thing is for policymakers to send strong market signals saying that energy transitions are going to happen. Otherwise, companies will be reluctant to commit a large-scale capital in new project development. So sending the strong signals about decarbonization can help reduce these investment risks and also to help attract more capital for new project development. And there's also scope to improve some geological survey and streamlining the permitting procedures and providing some strategic funding in some cases. And second item is about promoting the technology innovation at all points along the value chain. And the scope of technology innovation can include the technologies to reduce material intensity or enable the material substitution, or on the production side, the technologies to reduce emissions during the production process, or technologies to unlock the more production volumes from lower grade ores or the waste volumes. So in the past, when there are some market strains, supply the tightening, and the technology innovation actually played a major role in alleviating these strains. So we think this second item is very much important in ensuring the reliable supply of minerals. And the third item is about scaling of recycling. Today, the recycling system for some of the bulk materials are well established for aluminium, steel, but this is not the case for many of the energy transition minerals, including lithium, cobalt, and nickel. But we think this will have to change as we are expecting a surge in the amount of the spent batteries, solar panels, and wind turbines from around the 2030s. And if not addressed, these burgeoning waste volumes will pose a huge pressure to address these waste volumes. But if well addressed, this will be a valuable sources of minerals and metals to recover. And the fourth item is about enhancing the supply chain resilience and market transparency. And also, there's some scope to mainstreaming higher the environmental and social standard. Today, many consumers and investors are calling for the volumes that is responsibly and sustainably developed. But today, most of the production, the large part of the production is coming from the regions with either the lower governance scores or higher emission intensity. And this means if the environmental and social performance don't rise, and consumers will need to compete for a small pool of supply that is sustainably and responsibly developed, which can add the layers of market strains. So we think there are some strong linkages between improving the environmental and social performance and also ensuring the reliable supply of minerals. Finally, not a single country can address these challenges alone. So we think there are some strong case for strengthened international collaboration between producers and consumers, and to promote the more supply and to promote technology innovation, and also to harmonize regulations around recycling. So I will stop here. So thank you for your attention, and I will take any questions you have. Thank you.